Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Torah study. We're learning V'yadaita Maskov, we're learning Chassidus. Today's Torah study is generously sponsored by Elaine Collins and Ron Collins in honor of Elaine's birthday yesterday. May she experience blessing and success in all of her endeavors. Bracha v'atzlacha, a year filled with health, happiness, and success. Okay, so we're learning V'yadaita Maskov. We've done a little bit of discussions in the previous few classes, and I'd like to go back into the discourse and remind you where we're holding. Good morning, Daniel. Great to see you. Here's where we're holding. Remember, the first half of the discourse is academic. The second half of the discourse is incredibly down to earth, like incredible. You'll see it. Where we're holding right now is at the 47% mark. We're right at the very tail end of the academics, right? So I'd really love to get started on the practical. So to do that, I'd like to spend today's session on wrapping it up, right? Now, if you have the book, we're holding on, it was page 23 we reached? Yeah. Page 23 is where we reached, yeah. Okay. Yes, this is it. Today we're going to do the summary. It's going to wrap it all up. I'm going to do quite a bit of reading inside. Good morning, Melissa and Elaine. Mazel tov to you, Elaine. It's your birthday. You've dedicated today's Torah study in honor of your birthday, which was yesterday. Shnas hatzlacha b'kol mikol kol. Blessing and success in everything and all that you do. So, a quick reminder of where we're holding in terms of the flow. We began the discourse, in case you're new here, we began the discourse with the opening verse. We say it 3 times a day in Aleinu l'shabeach v'yadai ta'ayim, and you shall know today that Havaya and Elokim is all one. Havaya is God's name and Elokim is God's name. So to the passerby Jew, it seems absolutely absurd. It's like saying, you should know that David Vigler and Rabbi Vigler is the same guy. Okay, so what am I supposed to do with that piece of information? Like how are we supposed to deal with that? What's the problem? Like, what do we do? Right? But when you realize what the name Havaya and what the name Elohim represents, you realize that they represent two totally conflicting energies. Now the question begins to make sense. The question, Havaya is God's revealing light. Havaya represents God's smile. Elohim represents God's mask or his rebuke. But think of that, right? Think of God's smile and God's rebuke. The good times versus the bad times. So when you're dealing with the good times versus the bad times, it's easy to believe in God when things are good. But what about believing in God when things are bad? What do you do then? How do you deal with it? What the Torah is telling us is that the same God that gives us the blessings is the same God. I am, yeah. Okay. I'll call you after. Is that right? Oh, okay. Unless you want to say to me something, Michael. Is the same God that's giving us the challenges, right? The same God that's giving us the blessings is exactly the same God that's giving us what seems to be the curses. And that becomes deeply disturbing to us because we're wondering, like, what's up? Like, why? Why would he do that? You know, I can understand if it's coming from the devil, but if it's coming from Hashem, my loving Father, why would he do that to me, right? So we went through an elaborate process where we explained that the light in our lives, Havaya, and Elokim in our lives, the darkness, is all rooted in the same place, in God's infinite light. I'm not going to get too much into that because we are going to summarize that right now inside the text. Also, the purpose of the darkness is just like the purpose of the light. And we gave an example of that when I want to teach you something deep and I hide it, I mask it behind the metaphor, what happens? The purpose of the mask is in order that you should understand what I'm talking about. So the purpose of the darkness is also for the light. And then we finally said that even the medium of the darkness, even the process, not only the origin and the purpose, but even the process itself of the concealment, the fact that I'm telling you a metaphor, that itself, you can't say that I'm hiding the light so that later I'll give you an eventual light. No, this itself is light. The metaphor itself is light. The darkness itself is good, is light. The suffering itself is actually good. And that's where things get tricky. That's where it gets challenging, right? And now we're trying to wrap it all up as what we've done is that in the last section, what we learned is that we spoke about not being afraid of the dark. you're maybe 7 or 8 or 10 years old when you stop being afraid of the dark. But, well, 30, right? But the question is, you could be 60, 70, 80 years old and still afraid of the dark. The dark of suffering, the dark of anxiety. People live their entire lives and they're afraid of the dark. But can you imagine if you're able to overcome that fear of darkness? If you could reach the level of Nachum, Ish Gamzu, to be able to stare your suffering in the eye and say, I know who you are. I know that you are Gamzu Latova. You are light. Can you imagine living like that, Harvey?
It's hard to.
But what equanimity.
Yes, it would be nice.
I mean, I look at the Rebbe. I look at the Rebbe as a case, as a person that actually could do this. Melissa likes my analogy of God's smile versus God's mask. Okay, I look at the Rebbe who, and you read the Rebbe's books, the biographies in the Rebbe, and you read the story of the court case against the Rebbe, and you see how the Rebbe dealt with strife and struggle and anxiety, and there's always a level-headedness. He did what he had to do, but he never lost his cool. It's very, very interesting to see that. You to know a person when they're in struggle, when they're suffering. But imagine you able to live your life with such equanimity that no matter if you have light or dark.
But he was unique. He was the Moses of our generation.
Okay, but then you read the Psalms of David, Marty, and it says in the Psalms, Laila kayim yair. The night shines like the day. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, because you are with me. I know this is good. This is Gamzula Tova. I said on Shabbos that when David, this is the most brilliant example, when David was cursed, and I mentioned this the other day, when David was cursed by Shimon ben Gera, the head of the Sanhedrin, somebody cursed David. So what does he say? The general wants to kill him, to kill the guy. David says, no, don't. And he said to him, Hanichule, leave him. The words came out of the word of Havaya. It's Havaya talking. I don't see the Nazi. I don't see the anti-Semite. I see the word of Havaya talking. Don't shoot the messenger. Brilliant for him to be able to see the presence of God, of Havaya, behind the mask. But how do you reach this level? Look, obviously you have to meditate on Chassidus, right? Good morning, Ed. We haven't seen you in forever here. Ed Hockman, great to see you. Okay, so how do we reach this level? That's really what this mimer is all about. In the words of Harvey Barnett, this is a didactic. It's a didactic. You've got to be able to evolve your paradigms. I mean, it might take you the rest of your life to go through this little book. Think about that. We could cover it in 3-4 months, but it might take the rest of your life meditating to be able to not be afraid of the dark. Now, I'm not preaching, by the way. I'm not preaching. I'm talking to me. You understand this, right? It's not like I'm telling you to do something. I'm talking to myself, and you guys happen to be listening, because this is something which I need to do, to reach, to achieve. Somebody once asked me, a new member of the community says, so Rabbi, what do you do you have any crisis of faith? Interesting question, right? Because to him, God is either you believe or you don't believe, and that's it. It's like a binary. It's a binary choice. He was a newcomer to to Chabad, right? So he was like, you either believe in God or you don't. Like, that's the bottom line. So if you believe, then what do you have to do as Judaism? Like what is your whole faith all about? Like me, I struggle with stuff I believe. But you believe. So what? So your Judaism must be boring.
What do we do here?
Yeah, do you see what I'm saying? Like, what are you praying for? Like, what are you doing? But when you realize the depth, the scuba dive of what's going on, and we're just scratching the surface of this discourse. This is an early discourse of the Rebbe Rashab. It's an early discourse. It's not. This is like, this is the appetizer. You know what I mean? This is not. Sometimes I wonder, I'm like, I need like 2,000 years of life to be able to get through all this, to finish it all. In any event, what we said was that the point that we left off is that the darkness is not where the light is hidden. No, it's not where the light is absent. It's where the light is hidden. That's all. It's not that the light is absent. The light is just hidden. And proof of that is that when teacher talks to student, teacher uses a metaphor, right? Teacher teaches profundity with a metaphor, right? So the student only sees the darkness, only sees the metaphor. He doesn't see the light. But what does teacher see in the metaphor? He sees the light shining straight through the metaphor. So if the teacher can see the light shining through the metaphor, it's there. It's just that the student can't see it yet. Keyword being yet. In fact, we know that after 40 years, you reach the depth of your teacher's understanding. After 40 years of toil, you reach the depth of your teacher's understanding. What that tells us is that you will find that light. It's there. We can expedite. We can put a little expediting on. Okay. So that's what we're holding up to. And I want to read this now inside the text. We're going to do on page 23. I'm actually going to go back to the middle of page 22 to the point that I just said. If you don't have the text, you could just follow. You could just listen along. But if you do, then you can follow along. I'm in the middle of page 22. I don't know if you have the printout. It starts furthermore even. Okay. Furthermore, even for the creations. This is basically, we're starting to summarize everything that we've learned so far as we're turning the corner from the academic to the practical. Okay. Furthermore, even for the creations. This is us, the recipient, the student. This process cannot be considered a genuine concealment. The light is not truly concealed. The two concepts are interrelated. Were the concealment to be genuine for the teacher, it would also be genuine for the student. Conversely, since there is no genuine concealment for the teacher, there's no genuine concealment for the student either. That's what I just said. The difference between them is only whether this appreciation comes in the manner of a direct light or a rebounding light. On the contrary, this process conveys and reveals the light to lower levels. To explain. Listen, now we're starting something new. To explain the new in the summary. We're just doing a recap on everything that we've learned so far. It's just nice to hear it in the words of the Rebbe Rashab because it gives you proper, anchor. From the name Havaya itself, it is impossible for the worlds to come into being. Havaya creates, right? The doctrine of perpetual creation. Havaya is such a powerful light. It's infinite energy. You cannot create finite beings from an infinite light. They're too tiny to be created out of an infinite light. For Havaya is unlimited and cannot bring into being limited existence through the medium of the name Elohim. The light of the name Havaya is drawn down and revealed within the worlds to bring them into being and to give them life. So Elohim serves as a resistor, just like Hoover Dam cannot power your house, right? Because it would blow the circuit. You need a resistor, you need a transformer to be able to break it down. That's what Elohim does to the power of Havaya. Havaya is infinite light. Elohim masks the light of Havaya to the point that you can create limited beings. Thus, everything that exists has an inside and an outside. This is the beginning of the discourse. The inside of everything is the presence of God. The outside is nature or science. So when we look at us Klippa beings, people based in Klippa, we look and we judge a book by its cover. We see superficial perceptions, and we just see nature. We say, okay, nature. There's no God, but there's a plant. There's no God, but there is a waterfall, right? That's because you're superficial. But if you thought about it, you'd look beneath the surface and you'd realize that who created the waterfall? Who is creating the waterfall? It couldn't exist by itself. It doesn't just happen. You don't have to happen to have waterfalls existing and flowers. It's got to be that it's created at every single moment in time anew, the doctrine of perpetual creation. Thus, the creation stems from the name Havaya. Although it is written in the beginning, Elohim created, Bereshit bara Elohim. We asked this question early on. This means that creation came through the medium of the name Elohim. Because again, you couldn't have a finite world if not for the presence of the resistor of Elohim, the mask. The essential power for creation, however, stems from the name Havaya. Indeed, the very letters of the name Havaya, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, relate to the word Mehaveh, which means brings into being. The word Havaya means creator. That's what it means. Havaya must be the motivating force behind the creation because every activity comes through the expression of an active potential. In this instance, the name Havaya. For the name Havaya is associated with revelation. Okay, let's not get stuck in that little piece over there. Now, how do we recognize the presence of Havaya? How do we recognize the presence of Elohim? When we talk about our own ego, we're referring to Elohim. We're referring to how we perceive the world through the mask of God, where we don't see God, we see ourselves. When we talk about Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimlach Le'olam Va'ed, when you say God was king, God is king, God will be king, what you're doing is that you're digging a hole and you're going all the way through and you see the inside, right? So we vacillate, we oscillate between both. To put in slightly different perspective, I like this analogy of a mirror. Well, let's say a glass. You have a glass, right? And the glass is a one-way mirror. So when you look at the glass, what do you see? Ordinary people see themselves. They look at the one-way mirror, they see themselves. The one-way mirror is called, right? They see themselves, ordinary person. But a smart person says, one second, I know that there's somebody on the other side of that mirror and they're looking at me. So I've got a choice. I can either choose to look at the surface or through the surface or deep inside, right? So if I look at the surface, I see myself, ego. If I choose to look inside, you go to the window and you go like this, you're like, I see you, right? You know what I mean? So then you're seeing what's inside. That's Elohim. Elohim is a mask which is a brilliant shield of Hashem's presence. Brilliant. It just masks God in the most magnificent way. In one of the earlier lessons, I explained that there was a dual disguise here. On the one hand, God creates us in a way that our souls originate in superficiality and klippa. And at the same time, he created the world with a veneer, a superficial shield, which is the mask where he hides himself. So those two together create a recipe where we only see ourselves. But the wise person, the conscious person, the V'yodaita Moskova person, is the one that's able to see what's inside and behind the glass. Let's just see this in the words of the Rebbe. On this basis, we can comprehend the phrase, God is king, God was king, God will be king. Marty, God is Havaya. Havayim, in English, you can't translate it, but in Hebrew, it's Havaya Melech, Havaya Malach, Havaya Yimloch, right? So we're recognizing, we're pointing a finger, we're saying, I know you're there. Expressing his kingship within the framework of time using past, present, and future tenses. This framework stems from the name Elohim. So time itself is a disguise of God. Past, present, and future is part of God's natural disguise, the laws of nature. However, by saying that God is, was, and will be king, what you're doing is that you're saying within the laws of time, within the laws of science and nature, I know that Hashem is supreme. Nevertheless, we say it is Avaya who reigns in the past, present, and future. Similarly, all existence has its source in the name Avaya, as expressed through the medium of the name Elohim. In this manner, with this verbal affirmation, the name Avaya is drawn down through our consciousness and shines within each world, and more specifically within each creation, bringing it into being and giving it life. This is what we do every single time we make a bracha. You make a bracha on water. But Rabbi, I made bracha on water yesterday, and I made a bracha on water 15 minutes ago. Okay, but now this water needs Baruch, drawn, Ata, you, the guy behind the the one-way glass, Havaya, Elokeinu. I am drawing you, Havaya, who's hiding behind the mask, Havaya, into Elokeinu, into this water. So what you're doing is every single time that you're making a blessing on food, it's not that God is so insecure that he needs you to thank him every single time you put food in your mouth. It's because he needs you to redeem the food. He needs you to unmask the mask, to disrobe the disguise, to reveal his presence, which is already there. You just don't see it, by declaring the Baruch Ato Havaya, Elokeinu blessing. All right, makes sense? On the flip side, there's our ego. So that's how we recognize Havaya. But then there's the flip side, which is our human unconsciousness. The influence of the name Havaya is expressed in the life force. For every creation feels that it is alive. The life energy within each creation is the light from the name Havaya as expressed through the medium of the name Elohim. Okay, that was whatever, just extension of the same thing. But here is the actual conclusion summary of everything that we've learned so far. We're going to really tie it up nicely in the next 2 pages. Okay, so if you have, you know where we are, Rob? To refer to the analogy, I don't know. It's page 24 in my book. I don't know. I imagine it's right down the middle. It should be right in the middle of the text. It's a paragraph that begins to refer to the analogy. Yeah, it's hard to find the page in that. If you had,
it's 13.
Okay, very good.
Page 13.
Good.
Yeah,
So maybe you keep a pen mark so next time you'll know where we are. You know what I mean? Okay. So if anybody is following along with us online in the text, then please, you can find that where we are to refer to the analogy on page 13 in the printout. Let me see comments coming in. Is Elohim holy Gevurah? Says Elaine. Yes, it is holy Gevurah. Havaya is Chesed. Winston, Elohim represents Gevurah and Hashem represents Chesed. Havaya also represents Chesed. Yeah, Hashem is just a very generic term referring to God. But Havaya is Chesed and Elohim is Gevurah. Yeah. Corina, Winston, what we call Hashem is Havaya. So both represent Chesed and compassion. Good. Well, compassion. Compassion is Tiferes, is the middle. So I wouldn't say compassion. It's kindness and it's strictness. Chesed and Gevurah. Havaya is kindness. Elohim is strictness. But let's not get too technical right now. Let's keep it nice and smooth. All right. All right. Good. Fine. Back to the text, because this is a beautiful summary of everything we've learned so far in the words of the Rebbe. You've heard it a lot from me, but I want you to hear it in the words of the Rebbe as we turn the corner from academic to practical right now. To refer to the analogy employed above, the communication of a concept by a teacher to a student. This is our key. This is the linchpin, the fulcrum of the entire discourse. Using the metaphor of the teacher and the student is what helps us understand the relationship between Hashem and us. Right? That's the key here, right? Through this process, the light of the concept can be received and can become settled within the mind of the student when he uses an analogy. It is when he hides the light, right? It is true that there has been a process of limitation and concealment of the essential light of the teacher. And the concept has indeed been enclosed in analogies. So yes, there's been some perceived darkness. Nevertheless, the end result is that the light of the teacher's conception has been communicated. And it shines forth and becomes settled within the student's mind. So in other words, the analogy, the darkness is what allowed the student to see the light eventually. Thus, even at the outset, not only at the end, you can say that there's a light at the end of the darkness, but you can say even at the outset, the teacher's efforts to conceal and limit his thoughts produce communication, albeit to a limited degree. So the darkness itself is with the intention of shining the light. When the teacher hides himself from the student, it is for which purpose? To communicate to the student. So only a superficial student will say, teacher doesn't like me anymore, he's hiding from me. A wise student says he's hiding because he's trying to teach me something deep. For the student has been given a concept which he could otherwise not have conceived of. Beyond this, as will be explained, the potential is granted to grasp the teacher's inner intent. In other words, the light, remember, is not removed, it's only hidden. After 40 years, he will find that light. It's there, you just don't see it yet. You're looking at a one-way mirror, but if you work on it, you will eventually come to see the glass. Can you imagine a person who's managed in his mind's eye to transform that mirror into a transparent glass? That's higher consciousness. To see within every rule of science and within every law of nature a transparency which reveals the hand of Hashem within, the hand of Avaya. Similarly, in the spiritual analog, the light, so we were going from teacher and student to Hashem and us. In the spiritual analog, the light and the life energy which shines within the inner dimension of every creation to give it life is the light of the name Havaya, which is drawn down through the medium of the name Elohim. So Havaya is God's infinite light that's too powerful for us to relate to. We cannot connect to it. It's like a teacher standing up right now and trying to tell us how to cure COVID. Like, I don't think anybody of us would probably understand anything that they'd be talking about, right? So too, on a much greater level, if Hashem was to reveal his light of Havaya, his infinite light, you know what would happen to us? Do you know what would happen to us? We'd burn up. And that's actually happened once in history, twice actually, when Hashem revealed himself on Mount Sinai. The first time, the first commandment he spoke, we expired. We died, and he had to resurrect us. The second time he spoke, we expired, and he had to resurrect us. The third time, the Jews said, you know what, Moses, how about you do the talking? You take the mic, right? What does it mean you take the mic? What, Hashem doesn't speak through Moses? Of course Hashem speaks through Moses. But Moses is a good resistor, a good limitation of the light, a good mask on the light. So that's what happens. If Havaya was to shine to us openly, we would just explode. This light shines and so it's Havaya. Everything that exists is the light of Havaya drawn down through the medium of the name Elohim. But don't get lost in the medium. Don't judge a book by its cover, right? You got to make sure to look what's inside the book. This light shines and encloses itself within every creation, i.e., there is a direct and immediate result equivalent to the student's immediate perception of the concept. There's a direct and immediate result, equivalent to the student's immediate perception of the concept from the transmission of this godly influence. In other words, the light of Havaya will shine in the student as much as the student is willing to accept it. As much as the student will be open to receive this light. So a fool will say, I don't believe in God. I don't see any light inside. I only see vessels. I don't see the pages of the book. I only see the cover of the book, and that's it. A wise person recognizes what's inside to a limited degree, because we're all limited. He can't just say, okay, I'm open to Havaya. Bring it on. Right? You've got to be able to take it as much as your vessels of consciousness and comprehension, your Chabad, your Chachma Bina Das. You got tools in your shed. Right? As much as your tools are able to process. You with me? I'm not losing you here, right? We're good? You're unusually silent today. You're good?
It's the drugs.
Okay, good. All right, good. There is a dimension of concealment in this as well. There is a dimension of concealment in this as well. For, although the creation feels alive, he does not feel that his life force is godliness. And this is what I was saying earlier. I said when you feel a sense of ego, that is the expression of your identification with the mask of Elohim. When you see ego, it's like looking at the one-way glass and seeing yourself. So there's a dimension of concealment in this as well. For although the creation feels alive, he does not feel that his life force is godliness. I'm alive because I'm alive, not because Hashem is creating me. It's ego. I feel like I'm alive because I'm alive. In truth, however, this is not a true concealment, for the life force that he feels as ego is really godliness. And a person can perceive this when he focuses his attention on doing so. A person is able to realize and sense that the life within him is really, if you really were to think about it, you'd realize that the life inside of you is not automatic. It's really not automatic. It has to be created somewhere. If you really thought about where your life comes from, like think about it. Don't kick the can down the road. Don't say, well, my parents created me. Okay, so where do your parents come from? Right? Like where did you get life from? Like where does life come from? If you really thought about it, you say, okay, there has to be a creator at some point. But we're so shallow because of our klippa origin that all that we see is the here and now, what's right in front of our eyes. And because of that, we just simply judge by what we see, and we say, my life force is my own ego, is my own, I'm independent existence. But if you really think about it, you'll realize that it's Havaya that's creating you. So in other words, it looks like it's a concealment because it gives you ego. But if you think about it for 5 minutes, you'll recognize the presence of God. Do you see what I'm saying? So what looks like a concealment is really a light. In other words, what we're saying here is that darkness is only darkness because you're shallow. And that's very profound. Darkness is only darkness because you've got bad eyesight. But if you put on a pair of glasses, you won't see the darkness, you'll see the light. So grow up a little bit, mature spiritually, meditate, marinate. And what will happen is that you'll start to see what lies within. Were you going to say something?
Well, I'm just thinking, talk about life force, and that like your nefesh, that part of your soul is your life force.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Right. But most people don't see it that way. They don't say, I believe in God because I exist. Most people don't say that. They say, I exist. And I'm not sure if there's a God. You see what I'm saying? But if you think about it, where does life come from? Like what? Where? Can you make life? You can't make life. Well, I can have a baby. Okay, but IVF can make babies. They got like a 22% success rate. You know what I mean? You'd think that they got this down pat. What, 33%? But you think you can make life 100%. 100%, we can make life. Nobody can make life. You can manipulate the sperm and the whatever to together. You can manipulate them together to make life, but nobody can make life on their own. Thus, the concealment produced by the name Elohim is not a genuine concealment. And this is something, friends, you can daven over for a year. You can daven over this line for a year. Thus, the concealment produced by the name Elohim is not a genuine concealment. The darkness is not really darkness. Hashem's disguise is not a disguise. It's the same. To give an example, we mentioned earlier, and Tanya brings this example too. When you see me right now, you can't see my naked arm. You see my sleeve. But no normal person will say, I don't see David's arm because it's being covered up, it's being hidden. A normal person says, I see your arm in a sleeve. Right? Obviously, I know your arm is there, but it's just in a sleeve. But when we look at God, in the analogy, imagine this is God, not me, but imagine this is God, right? You say, well, all I see is the sleeve. Right? I don't see what's inside. The concealment's not a concealment. Just wake up. You know what I mean? You're looking at a sleeve that clothes an arm. Thus, the concealment produced by the name Elohim is not genuine concealment. On the contrary, it conveys and reveals the light on a lower level. Because, I wouldn't be here if my arm was uncovered. If I wasn't wearing a shirt, I wouldn't be able to sit in front of you. The only reason I can sit in front of you is because I am concealed. There's too much. It's too much for me to come in undressed, right? I would never do that. The fact that I'm covered is why I'm here. The concealment is actually what allows for the revelation. And we have to apply that to the analog, to our relationship with Havaya. On the contrary, it conveys and reveals the light on a lower level, i.e. to creations which are limited, that's us, and not on the level of the light of the name of Havaya. In this manner, the light of the name of Havaya shines to them as well. So Elohim is a gift to us. The mask, the disguise of God, the rebuke of God, the bad times, which is where we're going, is what allows the light to shine within us. Behold, we're almost done. Behold, as explained above in the analogy of the relationship between a mashpia, the teacher, and the student. Not only does the student receive a limited perception of the teacher's wisdom, in the analog, the creations receive the divine life force, but also he has the potential to come to an appreciation of the teacher's inner and essential wisdom, i.e. the complete grasp of his teacher's knowledge, which he achieves after 40 years. So not only is the student receiving a limited perception of the teacher's wisdom, right? But also he has the power to be able to reach the full light of the teacher after 40 years, right? Similarly, in the analog, in our relationship with Hashem, with Havaya, in truth, it is possible for every person to appreciate a revelation of the inner dimensions and essence of the Or Ein Sof, of God's infinite light. That the name of Havaya will shine in a revealed manner within his soul. You can reach there. You can reach there. This is accomplished through Avodah, divine service, toiling with both body and soul to remove the concealments and veils until one comes to a revelation of the inner dimension of the essence of the Or Ein Sof, of the infinite light, which is above the external level that serves as a source for the worlds to come into being. You've got to be able to change, to improve your vision, better and better and better exercise of your glasses, of your vision, until eventually every mirror that you see, you realize is a window. And the next mirror is also a window. And the next mirror is also a window. And the perfect paradigm of this, I said in Shabbos in my sermon, was Joseph. Where Joseph tells his brother, I am Joseph because you sold me as a slave. I am who I am today because I suffered. I benefited from my darkness. And that did not come easy to him. Joseph, more than anybody else in the entire Torah, cries, is more emotional than anybody else. At least 9 times he cries throughout the Torah. That's the avodah, that's the divine service, that's the toil, that's the davening, the deep davening, the experiential davening that we daven. You can't daven at high speed. If you knock it off in 20, 25 minutes, I don't know how you could possibly do it. You got to meditate before davening. You got to daven slowly. You got to think about the words. When you reach this concept in davening, you got to stop, drop, and roll. You got to think about it. You got to put out a fire. Last piece, i.e., in the analogy, it is not merely the passage of 40 years of time. You can't just sit there like a glump for 40 years. But rather 40 years of strenuous labor dedicated to discovering the inner meaning of the teacher's wisdom, which is hidden in the allegories he used. Similarly, regarding our divine service, we must dedicate ourselves to the task of trying to appreciate the nature of the mediums, the mirrors, turning the mirrors into windows, with which God fashioned our framework of existence, to be able to see science as a window, nature as a window, the rules of this world as a window, not a mirror, that shine the light of Hashem through them by perceiving of them as channels through which God conveys his light. We can merit the revelation of a light which transcends this entire limited framework. You know what the biggest insult you can give to a Chabadnik is? You're a yesh. Y-E-S-H. You're a yesh. You're an ego. What that means is you're a blockage. Any Chabad rabbi will tell you, when you say to him, look what you built, Rabbi, you're amazing. Every Chabad rabbi will tell you, it wasn't me, it was the Rebbe shining through me. It was the one who sent me. It was the one who sent me. The role of a Chabadnik is to be a transparent glass, so that those that came before me can shine through me and bring the light of the Rebbe to this town as well. But if I am full of ego, me, right? then I block that light. Then yeah, that is what you've done, but you'll do a lot less. A lot less, because you're blocking the light. Stop blocking the light. Get out of the way. Right? That's why we daven with our back to the congregation, not with our face in the congregation. We're davening to Hashem, not to the cantor. Right? You see what I'm saying? So the role of a chassid is transparent. His biggest mirror is himself. And if he can sense the light of Hashem shining through him, if you can look at a fellow Jew and not see a Democrat or Republican, not see rich or poor, not see good golfer, bad golfer, but see Havaya. See the godly soul. If you can turn every person that you meet into a window, not a mirror, that is all part of this process of allowing you to transform darkness into light. And each person that you are able to do that with. And how do you do that, by the way? When you go to your polar opposite, your brother-in-law that believes in the opposite of your political ideology, right? And you say to him, I love you. He'll be like, what'd you do wrong? You crashed my car or whatever. He said, I love you because you are Havaya. You're my God. No, they're not God. Because God shines through you, right? That I see you just a mask. Your politics, your messed up politics is just an alibi. Exactly. Even though you're wrong, that's why I love you, because I don't get stuck in the weeds, right? So when you do that, if you can turn every person that you meet into a window, not a mirror, you're stuck in the weeds. Got to drain that swamp, Warren. So if you can turn every person that you meet into a mirror, then what happens then is that you're progressing level to level. And now that we finished the academic part of this discourse, now the Rebbe Rashab opens with the following words. To explain the nature of the Avodah, of the divine service required, to perceive the infinite light as manifest within our world, in order to understand what work we need to do, in order to be able to reach the revelation of this infinite light, it is necessary first to explain the concept of human struggles. As it is written, for God, your God is challenging you, i.e. a person is confronted with challenges which he must overcome. We must understand what is the divine intent in having man face such challenges. And that, my friends, is where we are going to conclude it for today, because this begins our change of course in this discourse. Everything we've learned so far has been very academic and a little abstract. Light, dark, sometimes you could lose me here, You're like, what's the rabbi talking about light and dark? I'm like, what, the sunglasses, what I mean? Like what's he on about, But now we're going to start applying, we're going to change the word dark into suffering and light into blessing. Okay, and we'll see where that goes, all right? It's going to be beautiful. Thank you very much for joining me. Any questions? Winston, you can easily find the text on computer. Oh, press. Quite the cliffhanger. Elaine, happy birthday to you. Thank you so much. We got a lot of journey to go. All right, guys, thank you for joining me. Winston is saying that you can easily find the text on computer. Press and control F. I don't know. Whatever. He knows how to do it. If you could do whatever instructions he says. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. Shalom, everybody. Have a great day. And thank you for joining me for Torah study.